So, Nintendo's first console in 1983. Well, first of all, the Famicom came out in 1983, and the NES came out in 1985. Released July 15th, 1983, the Nintendo Entertainment System is an 8-bit video game console released by Nintendo in North America, South America, Europe, Asia, and Oceania, and Africa. It was Nintendo's first home video console released outside Japan. In Japan, it is known as the Family Computer, or Famicom, as it is commonly abbreviated, selling 61.91 million units worldwide. The NES helps revitalize the video game industry following the video game crash of 1983 and set a standard for the subsequent console in everything from game design to business practices. The NES was the first console from which the manufacturer openly courted third-party developers. Many of Nintendo's most iconic franchises, such as The Legend of Zelda and Metroid, were started on NES. Nintendo continued to repair Famicom consoles in Japan until October 31st, 2007, attributing the decision to discontinue support to an increasing shortage of necessary parts. Nintendo released a software emulation-based version of the NES on November 10th, 2016, called the NES Classic Edition. It is a dedicated console that comes with a single controller and 30 preloaded games. At this point, Nintendo and Sega are not rivals, but they will be soon. So the first Sega console is the SG-1000. And it is also known as the computer video game SG-1000. Plays ROM cartridges, upgraded version with detachable controllers that can play Sega card games in addition to cartridges, released as the SG-1002. The computer versions with a built-in keyboard which plays Sega card games, released as SC-3000 and SC-3000H. Not commercially successful because of the number of consoles on the market already and the release of the Nintendo Entertainment System. I think this is a loss for Sega because Nintendo was very more successful than this console. So the next console is Sega's second major home console release worldwide. Initially released in Japan as the Sega Mark III, the third version of the SG-1000, before being redesigned and rebranded as the Master System. Plays both Sega card games and ROM cartridges. Smaller and cheaper versions of the console, named Master System 2, was released in 1990. It only plays ROM cartridges and sold poorly. Unsuccessfully competed with the Nintendo Famicom in Japan and North America, but it was commercially successful in Europe. Another loss by Sega. So the Super Famicom and the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or the SNES, in 1990 and 1991. Here, actually, the Sega Rivalry is implemented. Released November 21st, 1990, the Super Nintendo's Entertainment System, officially abbreviated the Super NES or SNES, and colloquially shortened to Super Nintendo, is a 16-bit video game console released by Nintendo in North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Oceania, and Africa. In Japan, it is known as the Super Famicom. In South Korea, it is known as the Super Comboy, and was distributed by Hyundai Electronics, like the car business. The SNES was Nintendo's third home console, second outside of Japan, following the Nintendo Entertainment System, whereas the earlier consoles had struggled in PAL region and large parts of Asia, and SNES was a global success, albeit one that could not match its predecessor popularity in Northeast Asia and North America, due in part to increased competition from Sega Genesis console. Despite its relatively late start, the SNES became the best-selling console of the 6-bit era, selling 49.10 million systems worldwide. The SNES library is known for upgrading some of Nintendo's most famous franchises and making the games even more critically acclaimed, such as Super Metroid, Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, Final Fantasy IV and VI, Donkey Kong Country, and Super Mario World, as well as starting some popular franchises such as Star Fox and Mega Man 10. Or Mega Man X, not 10. Oopsies. Okay, similarities to the SNES Classic Edition released prior. Nintendo released a software emulation based off the Super Nintendo Entertainment System on September 29, 2017, called the Super NES Classic Edition. It is the predecessor. It is a dedicated console that comes with 2 controllers and 21 preloaded games, one of which, Star Fox 2, is originally titled, developed for the system that went unreleased. Honestly, this is kind of tied with the Sega Genesis that we're going to be talking about next. And I like it. But I never played with the Sega Genesis, only Mortal Kombat, so yeah. The next console is named the Mega Drive outside North America and the Genesis within North America, Sega's third major home console after the SG-1000 and Master System released worldwide. Plays ROM cartridges. A computer with an integrated Mega Drive was released in Japan as a Sega Terra Drive in 1991. A smaller, lighter version of the console named the Genesis 2 was released in 1993. The Genesis Nomad, a handheld version of the console that plays the same cartridges, released in 1995, and an early version for use on Japanese airplanes was named the Megajet. The Sega Magnet Internet Service and Meganet Internet Service in Japan with the Mega Modem peripheral provided downloadable titles, some exclusive to the service starting in 1990. It was replaced with the similar Sega Channel service in 1993. Although the system was officially discontinued in 1997, third-party variants have been released around the world as of 2009. Now, I don't know who won this round of Nintendo versus Sega. It's kind of up for interpretation, but you guys decide. Next, we will be talking about this console. Add on for the Genesis with its own exclusive library, adds more processing power, and supports for 32-bit games to the 16-bit Genesis. Plays different ROM cartridges from the Genesis itself. Combination release of the Genesis and the 32X, codenamed Neptune, was planned for release in late 1995, but was delayed and canceled when the 32X was discontinued. Considered a commercial failure. That was just a little add-on. So the next console is the Nintendo 64, 1996 and 1997. This is actually the first time where it didn't have a Japanese counterpart, that it was like family computer style. Okay. It was released on June 23rd, 1996 in Japan, on September 29th, 1996 in North America, and March 1st, 1997 in Europe and Australia. The Nintendo 64, commonly called the N64 and codenamed Ultra 64, was Nintendo's third home video game console for the international market. It was released with 3 launch games in Japan: Super Mario 64, Pilot Wing 64, and Psycho Habu Shogi. Sorry, I butchered that name, because, I'm not good at Japanese names. And 2 in North America: Super Mario 64 and Pilot Wings 64. PAL regions also had 3 launch titles: Super Mario 64, Shadows of the Empire, and Pilot Wings 64, with Turok Dinosaur Hunter delayed until 3 days after launch. Other key games included Donkey Kong 64, Diddy Kong Racing, Banjo-Kazooie, 2 games in the Legend of Zelda series, GoldenEye 007, Mario Kart 64, Super Smash Bros., and Star Fox 64. The Nintendo 64 sold 32.93 million systems. All in all, this was a big success, and Sega's next console wouldn't be a big success. So let's see the next console. Here's the next console. Sega's fourth major home console and only released in the 32-bit console generation. Released worldwide, plays CD-ROM games. Released simultaneously with the 32X, which also plays 32-bit games. Sega Netlink accessory released in 1996 provided internet and multiplayer gaming access in Japan. It used Sega Net Internet services. Second version of the console, named Sega Pluto, with a built-in Netlink component, was planned but never released. Sold significantly fewer units worldwide than its competitors, the Sony PlayStation and Nintendo 64. In this generation, it was a failure and Nintendo wins. Next console, Sega's fifth and final major home console and only major release in the sixth console generation, released worldwide. Plays GD-ROM games, includes a built-in modem which could connect to Sega Net Internet service in Japan and North America, and Dream Arena service in Europe. VMU accessory serves as a combination memory card, second screen, and simple handheld console. Sold significantly fewer copies than its main competitors, the Sony PlayStation 2, because of the lack of DVD support. This was a fail compared to the GameCube, and this is a sign of loss and defeat by Sega. Unlike Sega, Nintendo came up with another console, and Sega just kind of gave in, and they started working with Nintendo because they weren't getting as much popularity as Nintendo. So honestly, the GameCube is the sign of Nintendo's victory, and Nintendo won the rivalry. Next, there's these two handheld consoles, which came out both 9 years apart from each other, but they're like kind of, it's the handheld console wars and it's not the console wars. But I just think that these are honorable mentions because, I mean, the Game Boys kind of revolutionized, and it kind of made their counterparts like the SNES and NES and all that stuff and N64 kind of like better because you could play it with them. So now we're going to be talking about this handheld console, Sega's first handheld console released worldwide. Similar to the Master System, though it cannot play Master System games without a Master System converter accessory. Plays ROM cartridges, commercially successful, though it was outsold by its primary competitor, the Nintendo Game Boy. So yeah, Nintendo also won this round. They've won every round so far, except for up for interpretation for the SNES versus Sega Genesis. Nintendo wins!